During times when the market is going down, it can be really disheartening for an investor and they may want to give up with investing completely. But in today's video, I wanted to show you a few things that will encourage you and show you just how important it is to be consistent and keep going. Investing can be daunting at the best of times, let alone when your portfolio is in red and you are adding your hard-earned money to what feels like a forever decreasing pot of money. You may even feel like you should just give up and it's pointless because you can only afford to add £10 a week or £50 per month and you just don't really see how that's ever going to get you anywhere. However, even small investments made consistently over long periods of time can add up to significant growth. Believe me, I'll show you some numbers in a minute. Even more importantly, as your investment continues to grow, the power and the effect of compound interest gets more and more significant, leading to exponential growth and wealth creation. Compound interest, although this may sound really cliche, is honestly one of the most beautiful things in investing. And although it's quite simple to many experienced investors, it's always worth revisiting. Here is quite a simple graph, but I think it's best to explain it simply and then start understanding it in more complex terms. But what you can see is the blue line is representing simple interest. And that's where the interest is earned only on the initial principal amount. So one amount that you put in, you then earn interest once on that amount. In other words, the interest is not reinvested and there's no compounding effect that takes place. Whereas compound interest, which you can see by this orange line, is where you get interest on your starting amount. And then the next time that you invest, you get interest on that starting amount plus the interest that you just earned. And then this adds on and you get interest on this new higher amount. And as a result, the investment grows exponentially over time, with the growth accelerating as the investment starts accumulating more and more interest, which is why you see that the blue line is kind of like quite linear and the orange line is seeing this exponential growth where it's really curving upwards. I think this can be really nicely explained by actually just using an example. So let's just run through a quick example with a few numbers now. Let's say you have a $10,000 or pound investment and that's going to earn you 7% interest per year. So with the simple interest, you're going to get 7% of the original amount every single year. So you're going to get £700 per year in interest. That happens once a year and you're not getting interest on the interest. It's just on that initial amount. But with compound interest, you would get the 7% on the starting amount. So in the first year, you'd also get £700 in interest. But in the second year, you would get 7% of 10,700. So you're getting 7% of the original amount plus the interest you earn in the first year. So then you would get £749 or dollars, whatever, interest in the second year. Then in the third year, you'd get even more and so on and so on. So it really does start to grow over time. When you first start investing, you can understand this compound interest idea. But to be honest, you don't really see it in the first initial years. And you start feeling like you may never feel its effects that everyone keeps banging on about. But I think the important thing to remember here is that it does take a few years for you to actually start reaping its rewards. And many, many years for you to see its true power. If you remember that curve I showed you earlier, in the initial period, the graph was very, very shallow. It's not until further on in the time that it starts going up. And that's something that's really important to remember because it can feel a little bit like you're getting nowhere in the initial first years. It can feel like the only addition to your portfolio is the money you're putting in, perhaps a tiny little bit of market gain, but it can feel quite slow. And then you can look at other people's portfolios and you can see that it's increasing by loads each month. And that's because they've probably been doing it a lot longer. They've been consistent for many, many years and they are reaping the rewards of compound interest. Compounding works around time. The more time, the more compounding. And that's why it's really important to not give up, even when you feel like your portfolio is really small. It's really those later years in your investment journey where compounding becomes really significant and powerful. Look at this graph here. So we're going to care about this light blue line, the compound interest curve at the top. So it's probably quite hard to see this, but between years 0, so right here, and years 14, roughly, you can see that the portfolio value wasn't really going up all that much. Like there's a little bit of an increase, but it's quite slow. Nothing too crazy is really happening. For example, you can see between the years of 8 and 15. So here, 8 and 15. Quite hard to point out, but you can see that the value doubled. So it pretty much went from £20,000 in the portfolio to 40,000. So it doubled in 7 years, and that was a gain of 20,000. It's in dollars, so $20,000 in 7 years. But then if you shift over a few years and you look between years 15, so here, to year 22, you can see that the portfolio went from about $40,000 to just under $80,000. So that is a gain of 40,000. So in the first 7-year period that we looked at, a gain of 20,000. In the second 7-year period that we looked at, a gain of 40,000. So what you can see here is as time goes on, that curve is getting steeper and steeper. And this is because the longer you leave an investment to compound, the more time it has to really grow. And that's why you always hear about the importance of starting early and starting as soon as possible, even if you don't have very much money to actually contribute to your investment portfolio. And again, that's why you hear about how someone starting in their 20s, depositing very, very little money, even like a one-off payment of $1,000, can actually end up with a larger portfolio in 40 years than someone that started in their mid-30s but added a lot more money to it. It's because this power of time and compounding is just so significant. It can't be overlooked. Also, another reason why compounding gets more remarkable in the later years of investing is because it allows investors to benefit from exponential growth. As the investment portfolio grows, the amount of interest you're earning each year also grows, which then leads to faster growth in subsequent years, and then the curve gets steeper. So, investing once versus regularly making investment deposits can have a significant impact on the outcome. Let's just consider 2 scenarios to actually illustrate this. Okay, so let's just suppose that you had £5,000, we'll do this in pounds, £5,000 that you could afford to put into a portfolio of stocks, and you did it right now. And let's just say that you didn't think you could really afford any worthwhile money to add as additional investments into this portfolio. Now, let's assume that you earn 8% every single year in interest, and we're going to leave this pot for 30 years. So we're not going to add anything else to it, because what we're going to assume is that this investor has come into £5,000. However they did that, they've added it to a portfolio, but then they only have, let's say, £20 each month that they can afford to invest, and they just think it's absolutely pointless. Like, that £20 is not going to make much difference, so they spend it on other things. So they make no more contributions. So let's just see how much they're left with after 30 years. Okay, so the future investment value of this portfolio, assuming an 8.3%, so it's increased it slightly. I don't know why it does that. 8.3%, whatever, 8%. The future value is £54,678.65, with the interest being the majority of that. So let's just scroll down here and put it in a graph, because I think that's quite nice to see. This is what it looks like. And you can still see that even though they didn't add any more to this portfolio, it ended up being quite a nice amount. They only put £5,000 in, they waited 30 years, they got £55,000 back. It's not a bad investment, really. And you can see that over time, the interest starts increasing. And that's really, really powerful. Look at this color here. So the balance is the little black dots. Initial balance, so they never added anything else. So you can see that they just had 5,000 the whole time. No deposits. Like I said, they didn't add anything. This is the interesting bit. Look at that interest grow. Look at that interest grow. It's so, so powerful. So this is worth doing if this is all you could do. But now let's look at an example where someone actually does add a few pounds every single month that they can afford. So this time we're going to assume someone has only £100 every single month. So the first month that they're going to put in is 100. The first month that they put in, you know what I mean. They're also going to have 8% interest, and they're going to leave it for 30 years. But this time, like I said, they're going to be able to afford £100 per month. So £100 for some people might be quite a lot, for others it might not be very much. The point is, I'm just trying to prove that if you even have a small amount of money that you can afford to contribute, it's worth doing, even if you feel like it's not. So let's just calculate this and see what we get. So remember, 55,000 was what we saw here. Look at this, 150,000. just over, with 114 of that being in interest. So that is quite crazy. So let's just go and have a look at the graph of this one. So what you can see here is that there are deposits. So £100 is going into, let's just get the deposit. £100 is going every single month into this portfolio, and you are accumulating interest on the portfolio. So you're getting interest on the initial amount plus the interest, like we discussed earlier. And you can see that by actually even adding £100 a month, look how much more that is. And you may feel like £100 not going to get you anywhere. So let's actually just see here. We'll put £100 in originally, but let's say you can only afford £30 a month, which seems like not very much, right? But let's just see what this gives us. Okay, it doesn't quite give us the same as the first example, but still, 45,000, with most of that coming from interest just by putting £30 a month. That's quite impressive. Of course, the best outcome would be that you had a lot of money and you were able to drip feed it in constantly over long periods of time. That would give you the best outcome. But I understand that that's not the reality for most people. Most people don't have 5,000, 1,000, 10,000 that they can afford every single month to put into investments. It's just not the way it works for most people, unfortunately. But the point here is that even if you have a smaller amount and you add that to investments for periods of time and stay consistent, it can still really add up and become a pot of money that you never thought was possible for you to have. And as you can see by them examples, regularly adding money into your portfolio, even if it feels small, can really grow that portfolio over time. And this is because each of them contributions that you add is also experiencing the effect of compound interest. Each one of those deposits is earning interest, and that is adding to your portfolio time and time again. There's lots of information out there about whether a lump sum investment or dollar cost averaging is better as an investor. That's not really what this is about. This is more about the point that I'm trying to make is more about how even if you feel like you don't have very much to add to your portfolio, being consistent and adding regular deposits can really, really pay off because of that power of compound interest and time. But I suppose what you could say as well is that regularly adding money to your portfolio helps you to sort of balance out the market volatility because you're buying stocks at different prices. One month you may end up buying higher, one month lower, and overall you tend to average out the price that you're buying in at. That is known as dollar cost averaging. It's kind of a side effect to this. If you're regularly making deposits, you're going to see that even if that's not your intention. But yeah, I hope this video was somewhat motivating. It can feel very hard as an investor, especially when you're in the early years, to stay psychologically focused on the end goal because it feels like you're getting nowhere. It does. It feels pretty rubbish, especially when you start when the markets are going down. But that's a time of opportunity. And if you remember the power of compounding interest, you can let that take effect over many, many years and you'll thank yourself. Anyway, if you want to join my Patreon and get access to the Discord, then please have a look in the description below. I'll leave a link. But that's all for today. I hope this video has done one thing, and that is to motivate you and keep you going. So I'll see you very soon in another video.